Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to another cozy episode of our little bedtime history corner. Laugh before we dive into tonight's wild ride if you're already feeling that warm, fuzzy anticipation of a good story. So why not just hit that like button and subscribe? No pressure though. So sort of like Anka, only if this content really clicks with you. And hey, I'd love to feel a little closer to you all. So yeah, once you're settled in, drop a comment telling me where you're tuning in from and what time it is in your neck of the woods. Laugh. There's something kind of magical about knowing we're all winding down together, even if we're just miles apart. Now it's time to set the mood, dim those lights until the room's wrapped in a soft, dreamy glow, fire up that trusty little fan for some gentle white noise, just like laugh, sort of, it's like a lullaby for your ear. Get comfy, snuggle under those covers, and let your mind start to drift. Because tonight we're just peeling back the layers on one of the sneakiest, most fascinating business empires in history. Laugh the wild, century-long saga of Coca-Cola. You might think you know this fizzy drink, but trust me, there are more twists and turns than you'd find in a pretzel factory. So anyway, laugh, take a deep breath, let go of the day's stress, and let's just tiptoe into this story together. Picture this, it is 1886, and the world is a very different place. Gas lamps flicker on the streets, and like horse-drawn carriages clatter by in the middle of this old, school scene. A pharmacist named John Pemberton is about to accidentally create one of the most iconic drinks in history. Laughed just like on Coca-Cola. But here's the kicker, it wasn't Pemberton, a wounded Civil War veteran who'd become addicted to morphine, was desperately trying to cook up a cure. Laugh, his original concoction was a cocoa wine tonic called Gon Pemberton's French wine. Coca-Cola, just like marketed as a patent medicine to soothe nerves and boost energy. But then Atlanta decided to go dry and ban alcohol. Panicking, Pemberton swapped out the wine for sugar syrup and added some kind of fizzy water. Voila, the first batch of Coca-Cola was actually born. Now here's where things get a bit sketchy. Pemberton claimed his new drink cured everything from headaches to impotence. Sounds like a snake oil salesman side pitch, right? Laugh. Well, it just kind of was. He slapped on labels calling it the ideal brain tonic. Laugh, and like a valuable physiological standard, and people bought it like literally. They lined up at soda fountains, convinced this brown liquid was the next big thing in medicine. Pemberton didn't have a really solid plan. He sold rights to his formula piece by piece, even to his bookkeeper, as Doug Griggs Candler, a shrewd businessman, sold the real potential. While Pemberton died broke in 1888, Candler started piecing together the rights. Slowly building an empire on a drink that was more like marketing magic than medical marvel. The original formula. It contained cocaine from coca leaves, yes, the actual drug, and caffeine from cola nuts. Laugh, back then, cocaine wasn't illegal, and companies didn't like tea have to list ingredient. So yeah, they got away with selling what was basically a legal high disguised as a health drink. So it wasn't until 1903 that Coca-Cola removed most of the cocaine from its formula. But the name and the mystery remain. In those early days, Coca-Cola was less about taste and more about the story. Pemberton and Candler spun tales of a magical elixir preying on people as desire for a quick fix. Little did they know that this accidental, slightly deceptive start would be the foundation for a multi-billion-dollar monopoly. As Asa Candler began to amass control over Coca-Cola in the late 1880s, he faced a crucial challenge. Protecting his newly acquired treasure, enter the whole world of patents and trademarks. A murky battlefield where Candler would deploy some sort of rather crafty tactics. Back then, maybe the patent system wasn't as airtight as it is today. Candler knew that simply patenting the Coca-Cola formula wasn't enough. Why? Because if he revealed the exact ingredients in a patent application, competitors could just easily replicate it. So he came up with a really sneaky workaround. Instead of patenting the formula itself, he focused on patenting the process of making the syrup. And even then, he actually left out the most critical detail. In 1893, Candler filed for a trademark on the name Coca-Cola twice, describing it as a medicinal beverage. This was a strategic move. By classifying it as medicinal, he could continue to play up the health benefits angle, which had always been a major selling point since Pemberton's days. But here's the catch, so there was little scientific evidence to back up these claims. Candler also took advantage of the lack of strict regulations on ingredient disclosure. He kept the formula a closely guarded secret, even from his own employee. Legend has it that only a handful of people ever really knew the full recipe, and they actually were sworn to secrecy. This aura of mystery not only fueled consumer curiosity, but also made it nearly impossible for competitors to create an exact copy. To further solidify his control, Candler fought tooth and nail against any attempts to challenge his trademarks. He sued companies that used similar sounding names or designs, arguing that they were trying to cash in on Coca-Cola's growing popularity. These legal battles weren't just about protecting the brand, they were just about eliminating competition before it even had a chance to take off. In a way, Candler's patent and trademark strategies were a masterclass in legal loopholing, so he used the system to his advantage, bending the rules just enough to maintain a monopoly over Coca-Cola. While these tactics might seem unethical by today's standards in the cutthroat business environment of the late 19th century, they really were par for the course, and they really set the stage for Coca-Cola's dominance in the decades to come. Asa Candler wasn't just a shrewd businessman, he was a wordsmith with a knack for spinning tales that made people reach for their wallets. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, when health fads were all the rage, Candler decided to hitch Coca-Cola's wagon to the wellness train, and boy, did he just take it for a wild ride. At the time, consumers were constantly bombarded with promises of miracle cures and elixirs. Candler saw an opportunity and ran with it. He plastered advertisements everywhere, claiming that Coca-Cola was where so good for the brain, going daily, a great pick me up lean, and even so dang mind that the Rionic pick me up scene came from the caffeine and the now minimal amounts of cocaine in the formula. It was all about creating an image of a product that wasn't just a fizzy drink but a health essential. One of his most genius marketing ploys was the use of testimonials. Candler scoured the country for people who would swear by the healing powers twice of Coca-Cola, real or fabricated. These stories painted like a picture of a beverage that could solve everything from a mild headache to severe fatigue. Newspapers were filled with quotes like, yeah, I was on the verge of collapse, but a glass of Coca-Cola brought me back to life. It was the ancient equivalent of influencer marketing, but without the Instagram filter. Candler also targeted specific demographics. He knew that office workers and students were often tired and in need of a boost, so he actually positioned Coca-Cola as the perfect study or work companion. Posters showed men in suits sipping Coke at their desks, looking refreshed and ready to conquer the world. Women, too, were targeted with images of elegant ladies enjoying a glass of Coca-Cola at social gatherings, just suggesting that it was a sophisticated and healthy choice. But here's the funny and slightly shady part. As scientific research began to question the health claims of many patent medicines, Coca-Cola somehow managed to skate by. Candler and his team were masters at walking the fine line between exaggeration and legality. They continued to imply health benefits without making any concrete, provable statements. It was just a game of smoke and mirrors, and for decades it really worked like a charm. Thanks to these marketing tactics, Coca-Cola went from a niche soda fountain drink to a household name. Candler had successfully tricked the public into believing that a sugary caffeinated beverage was really good for them, and as the company grew, so did its power to shape public perception and really dominate the soft drink market. As Coca-Cola's popularity skyrocketed in the early 1900s, so did the number of copycat brands vying for a slice of the soft drink pie. Instead of relying on fair competition, Asa Candler and his team resorted to some seriously shady tactics to crush the competition. It was like a pretty high kind of stakes game of corporate sabotage, and so Coca-Cola was playing to win, just sort of like untaught by any means necessary. One of their favorite tricks was spreading rumors. Whispers would start in local communities that rival drinks were made with poisonous chemicals like daily or feet rotting ingredient. They didn't need proof. So a well-placed rumor could do more damage than any kind of lawsuit. For example, when a new brand popped up with a similar-sounding name, Coca-Cola insiders would hint that it was a cheap knockoff that could make you sick. No one wanted to take that risk, so consumers stuck with the Tita's safety choice, Coca-Cola. Candler's team also engaged in aggressive legal battles. They flooded the courts with trademark infringement lawsuits, even when the claims were pretty flimsy at best. Smaller companies didn't have the money or resources to fight back, so they were forced to change their names, rebrand, or go out of business entirely. It was a classic case of using the legal system as a weapon to eliminate competition. But the dirty tricks didn't stop there. So Coca-Cola salesmen would sometimes sneak into rival bottling plants to gather information or cause disruptions. There were even reports of them bribing store owners to stock only Coca-Cola products, leaving no shelf-like space for competitors. It was a cutthroat strategy that made it nearly impossible for new brands to gain a foothold in the market. And let's not forget about the power of advertising. While promoting their own product, Coca-Cola would so subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, bash the competition. Ads would compare the purity twice of Coca-Cola to the mystery ingredients in other drinks without actually naming names. It was a passive, pretty aggressive way of steering consumers away from alternative. So these underhanded tactics weren't just about protecting Coca-Cola's market share, they were about establishing a monopoly. By the time Candler sold the company in 1919, Coca-Cola had crushed most of its competition, thanks in large part to these dark arts of business warfare. And so the legacy of these ruthless strategies would continue to shape the soft drink industry for decades to come. With Coca-Cola's success came a wave of imitators, each hoping to ride the coattails of the popular beverage. Asa Candler, determined to safeguard his brand, plunged into a decades-long battle over trademarks that would solidify Coca-Cola self-dominance. It was a legal slugfest, and Candler wasn't just about to pull any punches. In the early 1900s, countless companies popped up with names like Coca-Cola, Celery Cola, and Toca-Cola. These copycats weren't just using similar-sounding names. They often mimicked Coca-Cola, iconic red and white color scheme, and even its distinctive script logo. To the average consumer, these knockoffs were easy to confuse with the real thing, and that's exactly what the imitators wanted. Candler, however, saw red. Literally, he assembled a team of ruthless lawyers and went on the offensive, filing trademark infringement lawsuits left and right. His strategy was so simple: intimidate the competition into submission. One of the most famous cases was against a company called Coca-Cola. Cola argued that Coca was a blatant attempt to cash in on their brand recognition, and after a long legal battle, they won the right to protect the name Coke as a trademark. But it wasn't just about the names. Candler also fought tooth and nail to protect the unique look and feel of Coca-Cola's set branding. He trademarked the contour bottle, so a design so iconic that it's still instantly recognizable today. By doing so, he made it illegal for other companies to use a similar shaped bottle, further squeezing out the whole competition. These trademark battles weren't just about justice. They were about control. Every time Coca-Cola won a case, it sent a clear message to other companies, so mess with us and you'll pay. Over time, the legal victories piled up and the number of copycats just dwindled. So Coca-Cola had successfully established itself as the one and only cola brand, thanks in large part to its aggressive trademark strategy. By the end of this whole trademark war, Coca-Cola had built an impenetrable fortress around its brand. The company's name, logo, and even its bottle shape were protected by law, making it nearly impossible for new competitors to break through. It was like a masterstroke of brand protection that laid the foundation for Coca-Cola, century-long monopoly in the soft drink industry. Once Asa Candler had secured Coca-Cola's brand through trademarks, he set his sights on an even more ambitious goal, controlling the entire supply chain. Laugh at the heart of this plan was the syrup, the magical liquid that gave Coca-Cola like its distinctive flavor. Candler knew that if he could just monopolize the production and distribution of the syrup, he'd have a stranglehold on the entire business. Candler started by establishing direct relationships with the suppliers of key ingredients. So for coca leaves and cola nuts, the two components that gave Coca-Cola its name, he cut deals with exclusive distributors. These agreements ensured that competitors couldn't get their hands on the same high-quality ingredients, or at least not without paying exorbitant prices. It was a classic case of xiang if you can't beat them, so cut off their resources, laugh so what. But controlling the raw materials was just the beginning. Candler then turned his attention to the bottling process. So instead of letting independent bottlers source syrup from multiple suppliers, he just implemented a franchise system. Under this model, bottlers had to sign exclusive contracts with Coca-Cola, just agreeing to buy all their syrup directly from the company. In return, they just got the right to use the Coca-Cola name and branding. This franchise system was a game changer. It not only guaranteed a steady stream of revenue for Coca-Cola, but also allowed the company to maintain strict quality control. Since all bottlers were using the same syrup, every bottle of Coca-Cola tasted exactly the same, no matter where it was sold. It was a brilliant strategy that combined standardization with exclusivity. Candler also used his control over the syrup to expand Coca-Cola's reach. He offered incentives to bottlers in new markets, encouraging them to set up operations in areas where the brand was still unknown, as long as they were locked into the syrup supply agreement. Candler didn't really mind investing in their kind of growth. Over time, this syrup monopoly became the backbone of Coca-Cola's business empire. Competitors found themselves in a catch-22, so they couldn't compete without access to high-quality syrup. But Coca-Cola controlled the supply. By the time Candler sold the company, he had just created a self-sustaining sort of system that ensured Coca-Cola's dominance for decades to come. The syrup, once just a secret formula, had become the key to a multi-billion-dollar monopoly. As Coca-Cola's influence grew, so did the scrutiny from regulators. The early 20th century saw a wave of new laws aimed at protecting consumers from false advertising and dangerous ingredients. But like Coca-Cola had a knack for dancing right on the edge of legality. It was a game of regulatory limbo, and so the company was determined to keep the bar as low as possible. One of the biggest legal battles just centered around the use of cocaine in the formula. By 1903, public outcry over drug use led to pressure to remove the controversial ingredient. Instead of fully eliminating it, Coca-Cola simply reduced the amount to a trace level and argued that it was now safe. They exploited a loophole in the law that didn't clearly define what constituted Alec's drug-free cheap product. This way, they could still claim a connection to the original formula while avoiding a full-scale public relations-like disaster. When it came to advertising regulations, Coca-Cola was equally crafty. So as laws began to crack down on false health claims, the whole company switched from explicit promises of cure-alls to more suggestive language. Ads no longer said Coca-Cola Jing cured headaches daily, but instead showed people looking like refreshed after a sip, leaving consumers to draw their own conclusions. It was kind of like a masterclass in saying a lot without actually saying anything. Another area where Coca-Cola played fast and loose was actually in ingredient disclosure, even after laws required companies to list what was in their products. Coca-Cola protected its secret formula Hunmin School by grouping certain ingredients under vague terms like download sort of flavors. Basically, this allowed them to keep the exact recipe hidden while still technically complying with the law. The company also engaged in strategic lobbying as new regulations loomed. Coca-Cola representatives would descend on Washington, D.C. armed with data. Some of it suspect, and arguments about how their business was so crucial to the economy. They managed to delay or water down so many proposed laws that could have threatened their bottom line. In essence, Coca-Cola's approach to regulation was a constant game of evasion, so they took advantage of every legal gray area, bent the rules as far as they could without breaking them, and used their political and financial clout to shape the regulatory environment in their favor. And for just over a century, these tactics have helped the company maintain its stranglehold on the soft drink market. While the franchise system gave Coca-Cola control over syrup distribution, the relationship with bottlers was far from a harmonious one. Behind the scenes, a fierce battle of interests raged on as the company and its bottlers constantly jockeyed for power and profit. It was like a never-ending tug of maybe like war, with both sides determined to pull the rope in their direction. At the start, Coca-Cola granted bottlers long-term contracts with fixed syrup prices. This seemed like a really good deal for the bottlers, as it provided stability. However, as the popularity of Coca-Cola skyrocketed, the company realized it could make more money if it raised the syrup prices. But the contract stood in the way. Coca-Cola found itself in a bind. So how could it increase profits without actually angering its bottler? The solution, They started looking for loopholes in the contracts. Some contracts had vague clauses that Coca-Cola's lawyers argued gave them the right to adjust prices under certain kind of circumstances. Bottlers, of course, disagreed. Lawsuits ensued, and the courts were flooded with disputes over the interpretation of these contracts. It was a legal mess, but Coca-Cola was willing to fight tooth and nail to gain more financial control. On the other hand, bottlers weren't just sitting ducks. They too found ways to push back. Some bottlers began to diversify, producing other soft drinks or even just competing brands. This was a direct threat to Coca-Cola's monopoly. In response, the company tried to impose stricter terms on new contracts, limiting bottlers' ability to expand into other kind of product. Another point of contention was marketing. Coca-Cola wanted bottlers to invest heavily in local advertising to promote the brand, but bottlers often felt that the company wasn't actually contributing enough. Bottlers argued that since Coca-Cola was a national and international brand, the company should shoulder more of the marketing costs. This led to countless arguments and negotiations, with both sides trying to shift the kind of financial burden onto the other. Over the years, the relationship between Coca-Cola and its bottlers has been constantly renegotiated. Sometimes they've reached compromises, other times they've just gone to war. But through it all, Coca-Cola has managed to maintain the upper hand, using its brand power and legal muscle to keep the bottlers in line while still allowing them enough profit to stay in business. It's a delicate dance, and one that has just been so crucial to the company's continued success. When World War II erupted, most companies were scrambling to survive, but Coca-Cola saw an opportunity, a really, really big global scale opportunity. While bombs were dropping and soldiers were fighting, the company's executives were devising a plan to turn the chaos of war into a marketing goldmine. It was a bold move, and it would change the course of Coca-Cola's history forever. The mastermind behind this strategy was Robert Woodruff, Coca-Cola's president at the time. He declared, every man in uniform gets a bottle of Coca-Cola for 5 cents, laugh, wherever he is, and whatever it costs the company. On the surface, it sounded like a patriotic gesture, like a way to boost the morale of American troops. But beneath the altruism, there was a shrewd business plan. Coca-Cola set up bottling plants near military bases all over the world. These, like war plants, churned out millions of bottles, ensuring that soldiers in Europe, Africa, and the Pacific could get their hands on a pretty refreshing Coke. And it wasn't just about selling drinks, it was about creating a connection. Laugh. So for Americans just far from home, a bottle of Coca-Cola was a taste of familiarity, just a reminder of the life they left behind. As soldiers traveled from one base to another, they took their love for Coca-Cola with them. The drink became a symbol of American culture, something that just set American troops apart from others. And when the war ended, those soldiers didn't forget about Coke. They just brought their preference for the brand back to their home countries, creating a ready-made market for Coca-Cola in places that had just never seen the drink before. Coca-Cola also used the war as a PR opportunity. Ads showed smiling soldiers enjoying a Coke, associating the brand with bravery and victory. The company even distributed free bottles to civilians in war-torn areas, like winning hearts and minds, while also planting the seed for future sales. By the end of the war, Coca-Cola had established a global footprint. Laugh. So what started as a way to support the troops had always transformed into a brilliant marketing strategy that laid the foundation for the company's dominance in the international soft drink market. It was a classic case of turning a crisis into an opportunity, and Coca-Cola pulled it off with style. The 1980s were a turbulent time for Coca-Cola. Pepsi was hot on its heels, stealing market share with its Pepsi Challenge campaign, which claimed that consumers preferred Pepsi's sweeter taste in blind taste tests. In a move that seemed both desperate and daring, Coca-Cola decided to do the unthinkable, change its century-old formula. Laugh. This wasn't just a simple tweak. It was like a calculated gamble that would just spark one of the biggest consumer outcries in marketing history. The new formula, dubbed New Coke, was sweeter, more in line with the taste that had been favored in the Pepsi Challenge. Coca-Cola executives were so confident that this change would not only stop the bleeding, but also give them an edge over their rival. They spent millions on research, conducting over 200 taste tests, and were convinced that consumers would embrace the whole new flavor. When New Coke was launched in April 1985, the company made a huge splash. There were press conferences, massive advertising campaigns, and even a television commercial featuring Bill Cosby. But almost immediately, things started to go wrong. Consumers were so furious, they saw the change as a betrayal of a beloved brand, like a piece of American history. People called the company's hotline by the thousands, some in tears, others laughed, threatening to boycott. Behind the scenes, Coca-Cola's marketing team had miscalculated something crucial: the emotional connection consumers had with the original formula. For many, Coca-Cola wasn't just a drink, it was a symbol of their childhood, their family gatherings, and their national identity. Just changing the formula was just like changing a part of themselves. As the public outcry grew, Pepsi couldn't believe its luck. Their CEO, Roger Enrico, declared victory, saying that Coca-Cola had given away the greatest marketing asset in the whole world. But Coca-Cola wasn't ready to throw in the towel. Just 79 days after the launch of New Coke, the company announced that it would bring back the original formula, rebranding it as like Coca-Cola Classic. The return of Coke Classic was met with jubilation. Sales skyrocketed, and it seemed that the whole debacle had actually worked in Coca-Cola's favor. Laugh, some conspiracy theorists even suggested that the whole new Coke fiasco was actually a ploy to generate buzz and boost sales of the original formula, whether intentional or not. The formula, like just Zhongyi Jian, showed just how far Coca-Cola would go to protect its market dominance and how powerful the emotional bond between a brand and its consumers could be.
For over a century, Coca-Cola has been the master of getting catchy jingles stuck in your head and images burned into your subconscious. Laugh, their advertising campaigns aren't just about selling a drink. They're a carefully crafted exercise in psychological manipulation, all designed to make you reach for that iconic red can without even thinking. It's like they've been running a century-so-long experiment in turning casual consumers into lifelong addicts, like sort of like Unky, minus the actual drugs, of course.
Let's start with the early days. So in the 1920s, Coca-Cola ads featured idyllic scenes of families gathered around the dinner table, all smiling as they sipped their Coke. The message was pretty clear. This drink wasn't just a beverage. It was the glue that held happy moments together. Fast forward to the 1970s, and the Hilltop ad hit the airwave. You know, the one laugh just uncut the chorus of kids from around the world singing, "Oh, I'd like to buy the world a Coke and keep it company." It was so sugary, so sweet, both literally and figuratively, that it practically forced you to associate Coca-Cola with world peace and unity. But perhaps the most genius aspect of Coca-Cola's advertising is its ability to adapt to cultural trends while maintaining a core message. In the 1980s, when fitness mania was sweeping the whole nation, instead of pretending Coke was healthy, they leaned into the whole indulgence factor. Ads showed athletes chugging Cokes after a game, suggesting that even those who worked so hard deserved a treat. It was just a masterclass and turning a potential weakness into a selling point. Then there's the use of celebrities. So from Marilyn Monroe casually holding a Coke in photo shoots to modern-day influencers promoting the brand, Coca-Cola has always known that associating with the pretty cool crowd. Or they've even managed to make Santa Claus, the most famous man in the world, into a walking, flying, laugh advertisement. Thanks to a series of holiday ads in the 1930s, the image of a jolly red-suited Santa sipping Coke became so ingrained in so popular culture that it's now impossible to separate the two. But here's the sneaky part: Coca-Cola's ads rarely talk about the actual product. They don't brag about the secret formula or list the ingredients. Like, instead, they sell an idea, an emotion, like a lifestyle. They make you feel like buying a Coke isn't just a purchase. So it's on a way to be part of something bigger, something happy and timeless. And after a century of this advertising onslaught, it's no wonder that Coca-Cola remains one of the most recognizable brands on the planet. As the world grew more health conscious in the late 20th century, Coca-Cola found itself in the crosshairs of a new enemy. Nutritionists, activists, and maybe even governments so concerned about the effects of sugary drink. Suddenly, the company's century-old strategy of selling happiness in a bottle was under attack. Laugh, and its response was a masterclass in crisis gongguan, public relations that bordered on artful dodging. So, the first major blow came in the 1970s, when scientists began linking sugar consumption to obesity and tooth decay. So instead of admitting defeat, Coca-Cola launched a campaign to frame itself as part of a balanced lifestyle. Core ads featured athletes and health enthusiasts, like guzzling Cokes, implying that moderation was the key. They even sponsored fitness events and released low-calorie versions like Diet Coke, which hit shelves in 1982. The message, laugh Gaiton, right, not the problem,
sort of like uncat you drink us is. But the real test came in the 2000s when obesity rates skyrocketed and critics began calling sugary drinks the tobacco of the 21st century. Daily lawsuits emerged. Cities tried to tax soda, and documentaries like Supersize Me Like Laugh painted a grim picture of junk food. Jess impact Coca-Cola says, dress bubble down on deflection. They created front groups like the American Council on Science and Health Daily, which published reports downplaying the link between soda and obesity. They funded research that emphasized daily personal responsibility, called corporate accountability, arguing that people should just exercise more instead of just blaming drinks. When New York City attempted to ban so large-sized sodas in 2012, Coca-Cola poured millions into defeating the measure, calling it arbitrary nanny state overreach. Yeah. One of their slickest moves was just rebranding themselves as Asa Beverage Company, phone user, then Asa Soda Company. Guy laugh, overnight Coca-Cola began promoting bottled water, juices, and teas, as if to say, guys, see, we care about your health daily. Never mind that these products often came with their own controversies. So hello, misleading daily, all natural daily labels. But perhaps the most audacious PR stunt was the Every Bottle Counts You sort of like campaign, which focused on recycling rather than reducing sugar. They spent millions on ads showing people cleaning up beaches with Coke bottles, diverting attention from the fact that their products were contributing to the problem in the first place. It was like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, like sort of like Untucked, except the Band-Aid had a smiling polar bear on it. Through it all, Coca-Cola has managed to survive health scandals by doing what it does best, selling an image, not a product. When you can convince people that your sugary drink is a symbol of joy and freedom, who cares? Laugh. If it's bad for you, it's a strategy like that, so it just kept them on top for decades, even as the world around them grows increasingly wary of their sweet, sticky empire. While Coca-Cola built its empire through branding and marketing, it also had a secret weapon in its arsenal: cold, hard cash. When charming competitors into submission didn't work, the company wasn't afraid to buy them out. Laugh. So like just often with tactics that made even the savagest investors raise an eyebrow. It was like a game of Monopoly where Coca-Cola always had the highest bid, and sometimes the rules were bent just a little too far. The first major acquisition came in 1960 when Coca-Cola bought Minute Maid, a juice company. On the surface, it made sense, just like Buster's into non-soda drinks. But the move was also a strategic strike against potential competitors. By absorbing Minute Maid, Coca-Cola eliminated a brand that could have challenged its dominance in the beverage aisle. So it was a pattern that would repeat itself for decades. In 1977, Coca-Cola set its sights on a coffee company called the North American Coffee Partnership. Why laugh coffee? Because it was a morning drink, a market like Coca-Cola hadn't just to penetrate. But instead of competing fairly, they used their deep pockets to undercut prices and drive smaller coffee brands out of business. When that worked, they just bought up the whole remains, consolidating power in yet another beverage category. The most infamous acquisition strategy, however, came in the 1990s with the rise of bottled water. Instead of creating a new brand from scratch, Coca-Cola identified the leading player, Dasani, and laugh. So actually, they bought up regional water brands one by one, absorbing them into their portfolio. They did the same with juice brands like Odwalla and sports drinks like Powerade, so often paying premium prices to ensure no one else could get their hands on them. But here's the shady part. Sometimes Coca-Cola didn't even want the brands they bought in the 1980s. They acquired a company called Columbia Pictures not just because they had a passion for movies, but to use the studio as cash flow to fund their whole beverage empire. It was a financial maneuver straight out of a Gordon Gekko playbook. Just like tea, buy a profitable company, drain its resources, then sell it off when it's no longer useful. Perhaps the most brazen move was their attempted acquisition of PepsiCo's Tropicana in 1998. When the deal fell through, Coca-Cola didn't miss a beat.
Just TT simply launched their own orange juice brand, Minute Maid Premium, and used their distribution muscle to flood stores, squeezing out smaller competitors. It was a classic case of chop wool's. It was buy you will, bury you funk. Through these acquisitions, Coca-Cola didn't to just expand its product line, so laugh, so they dismantled the competition piece by piece. By the time regulators started paying attention, the company had already created a beverage monopoly, so vast that challenging it seemed impossible. It was a masterclass in using capitalism, its own rules against itself, and it says a big reason why Coca-Cola still sits atop the soft drink throne today. As Coca-Cola marched into the 21st century, so its strategy for conquering new markets wasn't just about selling soda laugh. Sort of just like Unco, it was about selling an entire way of life. In countries from China to Africa, the company didn't just set up bottling plants. It orchestrated a cultural invasion so subtle, most people didn't even realize they were being marketed to. It was like slipping a can of Coke into the hands of the world while wrapping it in a bow, a flock like American dream. So take China, for example. Laugh when Coca-Cola first entered the market in the 1970s, they faced a huge challenge, how to translate Dan Coca-Cola Gommuti into Chinese. The solution, they chose characters that sounded like the brand name, but also meant daily delicious happiness. Daily. So it's just a stroke of genius, like just uncut before a single bottle was sold, the brand had already attached itself to positive emotions in the local language. But the real magic happened in their advertising. Instead of airing American ads in China, they created campaigns that spoke directly to Chinese culture. One Lunar New Year ad featured a family gathering around a table passing a Coke like a traditional gift. It wasn't about being American, so it was about being part of a cherished local tradition. By blending in, Coca-Cola made itself feel like a really homegrown brand. In Africa, the strategy was equally shrewd. The company invested pretty heavily in community projects, building schools and wells, all while slapping their logo on every visible surface. It was a classic case of functional soft power. Sort of like a go, like then slip in the product. Soon Coke wasn't just a drink. It was a symbol of progress, a reward for hard work, a sign that you were part of the global community. But this cultural penetration wasn't without backlash. In some countries, Coca-Cola became a target for anti-globalization activists. In India, for example, protests erupted over the company's use of local water resources for bottling, leading to accusations that Coke was just draining villages dry. Laugh. So the company responded with more PR magic, just launching campaigns about water conservation and community engagement, just like on tea, but the damage was done. In the Middle East, Coca-Cola faced a different challenge. Ramadan, instead of backing off, they leaned into the holy month, creating ads that showed families breaking their fast with a Coke. Laugh, it was a risky move, but it paid off, sort of just like Unco, by aligning themselves with a sacred tradition. They became indispensable during the most important time of the year. The key to Coca-Cola's global success was its ability to be all things to all people in Japan. Like they were quirky and fun in Brazil, like they were vibrant and energetic in Germany. They were sleek and sophisticated. They didn't just sell a product, they sold a customizable dream wrapped in a red can. And as they conquered each new market, they didn't just gain customers, laugh so unke. They slowly reshaped local taste preferences and even identities. It's as a strategy that made them the most recognized brand on the planet, for better or for worse. As we reach the end of this century-long saga, it's us time to pour a final glass of truth. Coca-Cola. Its empire wasn't built on a magical formula or just like a refreshing taste. It was constructed brick by brick on a foundation of clever deception, legal gymnastics, and a relentless pursuit of control. From John Pemberton's snake oil sales pitch to modern-day PR campaigns that dodge health concerns. Like the whole story of Coca-Cola is less about a great drink and more about a masterclass in monopoly. Let's recap the greatest hits of deception. So starting with a formula containing cocaine, marketing it as a miracle cure, crushing competitors with baseless lawsuits, using war as a marketing tool, and even orchestrating a fake formula crisis to really boost sales. At every turn, Coca-Cola prioritized dominance over honesty. They didn't just sell soda, so they sold an illusion, laugh like Unca, a sugary dream wrapped in a red can that promised happiness, community, and even health. But here, the twist the consumers bought into it. We've sipped willingly from the cup of corporate manipulation, letting Coca-Cola become a symbol of our whole lives without really questioning the cost. We laughed at their ads, collected their memorabilia, and defended their secret formula, Fompato, as if it were like a national treasure, laugh like just uncool, while they used our loyalty to build a $250 billion empire. The real irony for all their talk of tradition, Coca-Cola has constantly adapted to stay ahead. They dropped cocaine, laugh embraced diet fads, and even pretended to care about the environment when it suited them. Their only consistent value has been survival uncon by any means necessary, and in a world where she temptates so brand loyalty is king, that strategy has worked spectacularly. So as you reach for that next Coke, maybe take a second to wonder, are you drinking a beverage or maybe swallowing a century of carefully crafted lies? Laugh, does the refreshing fizz mask the taste of a monopoly like that, squashed innovation, exploited resources, and actually manipulated generations? Or is it all just a harmless part of capitalism where the best marketer wins? The truth is probably somewhere in between. Coca-Cola isn't just a villain, it's just a product of its time, a company that thrived by understanding human nature. Just like Laugh, just our love of shortcuts, our weakness for a good story, and our endless desire for something to believe in, even if it's just a carbonated drink. And maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. In the end, we're all just suckers for a well-told lie. As the story wraps up, it's worth remembering that every iconic brand carries a shadow of history. Laugh. So just sort of like Unca, even the ones that pour happiness into our glasses, Coca-Cola, a sarnie from a pharmacist, hence mistake, to a global giant, is a reminder that success often dances with controversy. Whether you see them as marketing geniuses or masters of manipulation, their story is a quirky blend of ambition, deception, and the strange power of a fizzy drink to actually shape our whole world. So next time you hear that familiar pop of a Coke can, maybe raise it to the absurdity of it all. Just laugh like Unkata. After all, even the saltiest tales taste better with a little fizz.